Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Online for Authors. With me today is C.J. Martin, whose second novel is Peter, Jodi, and Gloria, about a college senior and an MBA student back in the 60s. Welcome, C.J.
Thank you.
Before we get into the details, why don't you give us a quick summary of this novel?
Okay. I did go to Northwestern University MBA school at this time and time frame, so it's sort of representative of my experience, but it's very much a novel, and the characters are mostly created. Some are a little bit based on people I did know, but it's a story of a second-year graduate student, and he meets a cheerleader from the University of Wisconsin when he was coming back from his summer job in California. They met in Las Vegas, and they start this remote romance where she's at Wisconsin and he's in Chicago, and they attempt to do this. It seems to work out. They don't get together very often, but they do make a good connection, and things are going along pretty well. And then Peter goes on a recruiting trip to New York for an interview around Christmas time, and
he meets this mystery woman.
Yes.
We don't want to give too much away.
Okay.
But so she then becomes, and her name is Gloria.
Right.
So I understand that this is fiction and that you are familiar with many of the places we read about, and like you just admitted about the school. But what I was amazed with was all your knowledge of that music in the 60s. Does that time hold special memories for you?
Yes, it sure does. And I think a lot of people in that time in their life are connected with the popular music. Like today, can't even understand the words of the popular music, let alone relate to them. But I think people in that time frame, it was an interesting time, and the Beatles were emerging, and there was a lot of good music, and I did like music, and I did like to dance to music too.
I got that impression that you like to dance. Yes, and
still do. At 82, I still do.
And I also thought that you had a really good understanding about the way people dressed back there, and it brought back memories. I remember the boots and the Nancy Sinatra and all of that. So there was a lot of that I enjoyed reading about. In your prologue to this book, you talk about a previous girlfriend. I understand that was in your first book, but for this book, you do mention a little bit about Sally. Why does Peter in this book believe that Jodi will be the kind of girl for him?
Well, as if you read the first book, Sally was a very exciting, vivacious, beautiful girl. She was an ice skater in the ice follies. Actually, I did meet a girl in the ice follies and dated her. So that is a little bit of a reality. And she was a very beautiful blonde. And but in the fiction part of it, she's a rather unstable person, and I'm this young 22-year-old who doesn't really understand people with depression and emotional issues. Right. And so I'm sort of our relationship is troubled by that. So she is actually toward the end of that book, we go to Monterey Peninsula for a weekend, and she has a nervous breakdown, and I don't know how to handle it, or Peter doesn't. And so our relationship sort of ends there. And she emerges briefly into the second book, and she's gotten better. She's sort of fell into a job as a model. And so she comes to Chicago to do a modeling for a new set of athletic sporting underwear for women. And so we have a nice connection in a hotel room there in Chicago and that. So it was a little flashback, but she was there was still some nice vibes between us.
Still had some feeling for Sally, but there was still, in the book at least, it was obvious to me that Peter still thinks that Jodi is really the one that he should, take more seriously. Am I correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she's like perfect. She's smart. She's very sweet. She's good looking. She's very wise for her age. She has a very mature attitude about life and what to do, and she seems to know what to do at the right time. And she can dance better than Peter can.
Well, yeah, that seems so. And actually, she's a cheerleader. So most cheerleaders are pretty good dancers that I've discovered anyway. So it seems like Gloria comes out of nowhere. I mean, Peter meets her on a flight coming back from a job interview. Why do you think he's so willing to accept her invitation for dinner and more? Because he's seen this relationship with Sally, and now he feels Jodi, as you said, was a lot more stable and probably someone he should invest in. Yet he doesn't hesitate very long when Gloria invites him for dinner, and even beyond that. Right. Why do you think Peter is so willing?
Yeah, I think he's a young, sexually active male. Temptation takes him over reasonably. He doesn't think enough about, what am I really doing? It's more impulsive and, gee, nobody will ever know about this. I can have a little quickie with this nice middle-aged woman who is very attractive and seems to be very sexually interested in me. And so he's opportunistic, if you will, and not really thinking
a little bit like The Graduate, maybe.
Yeah,
it's very kind of intriguing to him. Yeah. But the unexpected twist for me was how Gloria's penthouse condo suddenly becomes available for Peter. Now, I'm not going to spoil for those readers who want to read this book, so we're not going to say how, but was that something that you planned on writing from the beginning, or did that idea surface as you were writing the book?
I think I had that ending in mind. I had kind of the whole story thought out in my head before I wrote word one, from start to finish, really.
So you would be considered a plotter instead of a pantster, not writing by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, I guess so.
Do you think that's the way you will continue writing, or you, as a plotter, you plot your stories out before you start?
Yeah, I do. The first two I did. I'm actually working on a third, and I pretty well know how the whole thing is going to pan out.
Okay, we just seemed okay. So let me ask you this: is that the fact that you do all this planning? Is that from your career that you worked before? I know you were with a large oil company, and I know you spent some time in Asia and Japan and Singapore. Do you think your previous career was something that guided you in plotting these stories? Was that something you did in your previous life?
Yeah, I think so. And my undergraduate degree was in engineering, so you kind of think about a problem, and you don't just say, well, let's just charge ahead and see what happens. You're much more prone to kind of think through the whole thing before you jump. It's probably a combination of engineering and a business career that impulsive doesn't usually work real well in a business environment.
That's true. That's true. You retired at 55, but I thought it was interesting how you then developed this bucket list. Tell me about your bucket list after you retired.
Yeah, I did retire at a fairly early age, and I made a short bucket list. And the first thing on it was to get my golf handicap down to 5. And I did get down to a 4 a couple times. Not anymore, but so I attained that top item. The second item on my list was to write a novel. Well, it took me 20 years to get to that subject, and I started working on it, and as a never written a book before or anything, it was really much more difficult than I imagined to start.
It was.
And the first few chapters I wrote were frankly crap, and I just kind of ripped them up and started all over. It was kind of discouraging, but I said I'm going to stick with this, and I started just editing and rewriting and on and on and on, over and over, and finally I kind of got a rhythm, I guess, and it started to feel like I could do this and make it kind of an interesting story. And I had worked on it for over a year, and then along came COVID. And boy, I had all kinds of time.
That's right. We all did. Yeah. Right.
No, it was a great hobby to have during that.
It seems like you were very persistent in all of your quests. I know somewhere I read that when you wanted to make that handicap a 5, that you actually went to the golf course 6 days a week.
Yeah, I
do that.
It was only open 6 days a week. So.
Right. So I'm not surprised that you wrote for as long as you did before you got to where you wanted to be. So do you prefer writing early in the morning, or what's your best time of day for writing?
I would say morning, probably. I think kind of, you haven't gotten caught up in the day and been distracted by other things, and I liked writing in the morning. During COVID, I wasn't playing so much golf, although it's one of the few things you could do during COVID. But I think mornings and afternoons too. I wrote a lot in afternoons. It was more like, not so much the time of day, maybe as my mood and how I was feeling about my ability to focus and try to be creative, which sometimes you just can't do it. It's I'm
true.
Sure you know.
It's true. I know if our listeners and what our audience is more interested in a little bit more about this book, you might go over to the Facebook page and log on to Novels and Latte, and there will be some more information about this book, and you might even win a copy. Now, I understand that one of your favorite authors is Hemingway. Tell me why.
Well, I read him starting when I was probably in undergraduate school. I read a few of his things, and I kind of said, man, this guy, he really, he just grabs you. Really interesting story, and it's dramatic and emotional, and the people are so real, and you can just kind of visualize, almost feel like you know them. And I think I read something one time that he was considered the master of dialogue, and I just sort of gravitated to that style. But I think the thing I related to him the most was that, all of his novels were based on his own experiences very much, whether he was driving an ambulance in the Spanish Revolution or living in Paris with a bunch of authors with a movable feast, or fishing in the Caribbean. So he definitely experienced the environment of his novels. And so I felt like, well, that gives, I think it just, some people, I guess, can make up fiction. They can write about the year 3000 and things, but it was comfortable and for me to say, well, I'm going to write about stuff that I relate to and understand and have some depth of experience, not just fiction completely. It has sort of a reality check, if you will.
Right. Well, they say you should write about what you know. And a lot of people who write fiction spend an awful lot of time researching so they do know enough about it to write about it. But so you're at an advantage in some ways if you've already had that experience, and so tell us a little bit about what you're working on now.
So this is a sequel to the first two, so it's the next year of Peter and Jodi graduate from college, and Peter was going to go to work in New York or California, and Jodi was going to stay in the Chicago area because her mother was having some marital problems with her husband, and she wanted to be around to support her mother. So Peter does an about face and takes a job in Chicago and convinces Jodi to come and live with him in this very luxurious condominium, which he then has to explain to her how he got this condominium.
I can hardly wait.
So it kind of teeters on how is she going to react to this and deal with that. And fortunately, she acquiesces to and Peter confesses his past sins to her with Gloria. And then their life goes on. The story begins there and goes on.
I see. I didn't realize that it would be helpful when I read Peter and Jodi and Gloria. I didn't realize that I should have read the first book. Most people say that, each of these books that you read are pretty much standalone. And for the most part, I think this is a standalone. You could, the fact that you wrote the information about Sally in the prologue was very helpful. So I think on this next book, will it be one of those standalone possibilities, or should people? I mean, this is a series that you've started, and like I said, I didn't realize. So then I went back and started reading book one because I wanted to know more about how did this happen, and I was getting a little bit confused. So, what will book three be? Will it be? Should we read book 1 and 2 first?
I think it would be because, Peter and Jodi, their character, and particularly, I guess you could figure Peter out, but Jodi's, a very big part of the second, but really a big part of the third. And it's
right. I think that will be helpful. I mean, I'm interested in reading about the next. I said in my review that, I want to know whether or not Jodi and Peter move into this condo, and I guess I'll have to wait for the sequel. So I did write that in my review. Yeah. So I think
little teaser there at the end. I guess some of the reviews I had of the first book were people felt I left them hanging a little bit because they wanted to know what was next. But I said, well, that's like watching these TV series. They have 6 episodes, and the last half of the last one builds up for the next one. And you say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to have to watch the next season.
Right, so, you keep streaming. It's kind of like the way you want to write a chapter. You want to end that chapter so that people are wondering, well, what happens next? I got to turn the page, and I don't want to turn the light out now. I'm going to keep going. So that's kind of how, many of us writers learned that it was best to make our reader want to turn that page. So you do the same thing with your book. It's, we want to see the next book, whatever. Have you had the privilege of being in a writer's group in your area?
No, I never reached out.
Those are helpful because they kind of are your beta readers. They kind of help you along the way to, to change or make sure your continuity. One of the writers in my writers group, when she wrote her first book, it wasn't until after it was published and we read it that we realized that she left a dog in the car. It was like, and so we laugh about it and we say, well, we really should read each other's books early so that we make sure we don't leave a dog in the car.
Yeah.
But so I think sometimes writers groups really, really help us out in that way. And then
I had never heard that term beta reader until a month ago. I was having a reunion with people that we stayed in contact with from Japan, and every 2 years we get together somewhere in the country, and the group is shrinking rapidly, but we still get together. And this one woman who said, "I'm a beta reader," and I said, "Well, what's a beta reader?" And she was a beta reader for a very successful author in the UK, and so she's kind of has that. She says, "I don't get paid anything for doing it, but it's just kind of a nice thing, and you catch the dog in the car for the guy."
Right. So I would ask her next time you see her, if she'll be your beta reader.
Yeah.
Because I mean, those are priceless people who will do that for you.
Okay.
I think it's quite interesting. So you still get together with all the people that you worked with in that area, huh?
Well, they weren't so much co-workers, but we
just people you knew.
People that we met, and my wife met in bonsai classes and ikebana classes, and we played paddle tennis together at a club, and that was sort of turned into a paddle tennis and a very active social group after that. But the first time we did this, 55 people showed up in New Jersey, and they came from Japan, and somebody came from Singapore, and all over. So it's, those connections you make in those situations can be pretty bonding for people living in a foreign environment.
Right. You end up gravitating toward one another. My husband and I, he worked in Russia for 2 years, and you find yourself gravitating towards the expats and the people that, you're all in the same boat. You have, you don't have family necessarily nearby. And so you do become a different kind of close friend than the ones that you're familiar with in the States. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So tell us, how can people get in touch with you? Do you have a website, or do you have
I do have a website. I have two, actually, I guess. As CJ Martin is my pen name, as you know. And there's a kurtmarker.com, CURTMARK.com, is a website that you can reach me. And
where can people buy your books?
Most people buy it on Amazon, and you can buy it either in the e-reader version or a paperback. Yeah, looks like this.
Oh, that's the paperback version. Yes. Very nice. Very nice. Well, I've enjoyed talking with you, CJ, and I look forward to book 3. I do want to find out if they do move into that condo, and I think I just got a little bit of a secret hint, but I'm going to wait until it's out. So please let us know.
All right. Sure. Will do.
All right.
Thank you very much. It was great to talk to you.
Well, thank you. So everyone, join us again next time for another edition of Online for Authors. See you then.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.